This is Dr. Chad, and we will continue the discussion. Mainly, we will focus on modules D&E, designing successful organizations, teams, projects, and functional areas. The learning outcomes for both modules D&E are: define human resource planning and understand its strategic importance, understand the link between human resource planning and strategic human resource, understand the importance of human resource management information systems in human resource planning and human resource management, apply the techniques of human resource planning, have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of human resource planning, recognize different teams within the organizations and in their importance, recognize project and functional areas. So now let's start discussing Module D. We'll start with a definition of what human resource planning is. Basically, it's the bridge between human resource functions, strategies that will help formulate human resource plans in a response to this continuous change in the dynamic environment around us. Human resource planning is mainly involved in effective use of resources to achieve desired objectives. So we look at circumstances that are continuously changing within the organization and outside the organization. We look at internal and external environment changes, and it is an ongoing process, not done at a single point in time. It includes a series of long-term, short-term, and contingency plans to predict scenario analysis and planning in terms of changing dynamic environment around us. And the core ingredient of it is an effective dynamic human resource information management system. The overall intention of human resource planning is to provide a strategic alignment of the organization and its human resource management strategies with external and internal environment, and doing screening of the dynamic environment and screening of external factors, economic, political, and social factors, as well as understanding the job selection processes within, and analyze labor supply initiatives and labor supply market around us. Human resource management planning is very important because it forms the foundation of an effective human resource management program. Failure of this adequate human resource plan and the strategic fit of such a plan will lead to significant losses and costs to the organization. Let's look at the process behind formulating a strategic human resource plan. We need to understand the corporate philosophy, mission, vision, direction, values, and where the company is heading towards. We need to do a screening of internal and external environmental factors or forces that shape the organization. We need to understand the organization's strengths and weaknesses, and those would be internal assessment. From the internal assessment of strengths and weaknesses, we can formulate opportunities and we can change the threats into potential. So we formulate goals and plans, and from that we develop strategies and tactics. Tools of analysis: always in business we focus on SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Internal analysis of the organization is analysis of its strengths and weaknesses. And then from the strengths, we can lead to opportunities and threats. Also, opportunities and threats are an external analysis of the organization outside environment that can be potential for growth or potential for problems happening or challenges within the organization. Pest analysis is analysis of the environment, scanning of political factors, economic factors, social factors, and technological factors, because we do not operate in isolation of these dynamic changed environments around us. Another tool would be strategic capability analysis, which is our ability to meet our strategic objectives and to move the organization towards its desired objective or philosophy. For a more detailed analysis or a graphical representation of what I discussed previously, please have a look at the following diagrams. The first one is discussing approaches to strategic human resource plan, and the other one shows you how we can link the business to the human resource strategy and its plans. So there is a systematic approach for human resource planning. It starts with labor demand forecasting. We move to labor supply analysis, so to be able to identify whether we have shortages or surpluses and to try and bridge those capabilities or gaps between supply and demand. So we bridge the recruitment shortages that we need to be able to achieve the objectives in the previous strategic human resource model we presented. There are several labor demand forecasting techniques. Some of them are quantitative, others are qualitative. Let's start by discussing the quantitative techniques. The first one of those quantitative labor demand forecasting techniques is called indexation. This presents a forecasting of employment requirements based on organizational indices or variables or requirements. Have a look at the Lindoff model, which discusses the continuing relationship between output and employment numbers. Another quantitative technique is called trend analysis, which attempts to forecast employment requirements based on past human resource growth. Basically, it's the same as before approach. As the name suggests, it is a reactive model. It does not take into account the changing requirements of labor market and opportunities for employment efficiencies. Another quantitative approach is scenario planning and simulation, basically using computer-based systems to develop complex scenarios. So what is scenario planning? It's the process of finding or placing plausible, logical scenarios within the environment to make informed decisions. The intention is to change current thinking, intention is to improve decision making and problem solving, and to enhance performance and learning of an individual placed in such scenarios. Qualitative techniques are very important as well, because we need to involve the HR employees in the decisions and in the forecasting, even in trend analysis, because interpretation is key of the data that we collect through quantitative measures. Another measure for qualitative scenario planning is called the Delphi approach. In this approach, the forecasting problem is identified and then required data is collected. Then specialists are consulted, set apart, and a questionnaire is given to them to answer certain questions about the simulation. All responses are then collated and combined and given back to the expert for analysis. This process is always continuous until a consensus is achieved and a decision can be made based on everyone approving the discussion. Another method for qualitative planning is using the judgment of managers. Each department, supervisors and managers, they actually work out what do they need from the labor market. They develop their own requirements and targets, and then it is all combined into one overall human resource plan. It is a bottom-up approach. Another technique is the nominal group technique. It's a group process technique where members of a group are invited together, involved in brainstorming activities. Ideas are generated and then combined into an overall unified set of decisions, and these decisions are then ranked, prioritized, and acted upon based on the majority sort of decisions and ideas collected. There are a lot of changes happening in labor supply and labor market. Some of these changes are related to changing nature of industries, where more than one industry is integrated into another. Shortening of the life cycle is creating a blur between industries. Structure is changed and adjustment is being made to the way industries are functioning. Different productivity levels also is affecting employment and labor supply. Urban and rural gap between availability of resources and usage of resources is widening. Intergenerational conflict between preferences and employability and learning styles and development abilities of different generations is becoming an issue. Continuous demand for increased innovation and the influence of new technology, for example, digitization in the manufacturing industry, use of robotics, all of these things, artificial intelligence, is creating pressure on the labor supply and human resource plans. Labor supply analysis is an important aspect of human resource plan. It tries to determine the types and number of employees required within the human resource plan. It also determines when and where they will be needed. So timing and location of implementation for that plan. As we said earlier, labor supply can come internally or externally. We all know an organizational structure which indicates departments. However, there is another type of structure that human resource plans implement, which is a transition structure. It represents existing staff members and possible transition to other new staff members, either internally or externally. So replacing and transition between old and new is always in place within the HR department's plan. We've indicated previously that globalization and technology is always an important aspect of change, and it requires a corresponding level of vigilance in human resource planning. These are the most important changes that influence human resources. It influences the type of resources needed. It influences what type of skills and competencies we require. A concept is now being introduced, which is collaborative consumption. I encourage you to try and find out and analyze this, because it is the third phase of digital transformation that you need to be aware of. It has an impact on macro and institutional level at the same time. These changes in globalization and technology. We've reached the conclusion of Module D. We will continue our discussion about human resource plans in Module E. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.